So when we have something positive in our lives, it doesn't always mean that it makes our lives easier. And sometimes it can actually cause us stress, which is ironic because we don't expect that. So, for example, if you think about winning the lottery and we think something that amazing would just eliminate all our problems and would be the answer we need to sort everything out in our lives, when we actually think about it, it would be really challenging, and it would come with a whole set of new problems and new stresses and new issues that we would have to deal with.
Because we enjoy the familiar. I think that is so important to realize that we like what is familiar. And, you know, when we think of the word familiar, obviously the root word is family, familia or family. And when we think of how we generally speaking, how we relate to our family is usually the one place where we can really be ourselves, where we can be at ease, and where we don't have to think, analyze, and assess to make a decision. We can be natural, we can be comfortable. And in the same way, we like to be able to behave in a familiar way, familiar being how we've always behaved, because it's comfortable for us. And the way our brains work is that we actually store what is familiar, and we act on autopilot with what is familiar because it helps us to conserve energy for when we really need it. So we don't need to spend a lot of time or energy thinking about what we need to do. We just go ahead on autopilot.
That's it. And something like winning the lottery, our whole lives would change. So everything that we have that is familiar would be gone completely. And that's why all those challenges would be there. If you think about it, our lives are basically made out of patterns and habits, things that we do or we've developed as we've experienced life. And the more we experience it, the more we do it. And those silly examples like people say, oh, they have to have a cup of coffee when they read a book. You know, it's the association of, as I pick up the book, I need the coffee. And or people who say, when I have a glass of wine or a beer, I have to have a cigarette. And it's the association, or sitting in front of the TV and I have to have something to eat. And the two go together. And those are examples to illustrate, but those are habits that we develop through our lives. And what happens is we don't even realize that it becomes that habit. And the more we do it, the stronger it becomes. And you know, our brains are like computers. So the more we do things, the more they are stored in the brain. And we've got that, I don't know, you'd have to ask an IT person what it's called, but that area of our brain that would store it, that RAM, where this is the habit that we do. And the two go together. And like you say, it's autopilot. We don't even realize that we are doing it. So there is the trigger. I pick up a book and I need my coffee. It's like, without even realizing I'm doing it, it's there. And the more we do it, the deeper and the stronger it becomes.
Yes. So, and the reason that we associate with habits in our lives, why we focus so much on storing these habits, is because the habits provide us with rewards. So at a subconscious level, we believe that every habit, every pattern that we play out in our lives is played out for a certain reward. Often we don't stop to analyze the rewards. We don't even know what the reward is behind it. It's a subconscious association. But because we view the process as rewarding, our brain tends to store that habit in a special place in our brain where all these habits are stored over time, and we can implement them, as you say, as soon as we have the cue.
Exactly. And the reward doesn't even have to be positive or beneficial, which sounds crazy. I mean, how can a reward not be beneficial? But if you think of something like binge eating, so if I go back to watching TV, if my habit is to sit in front of the TV every night and eat a packet of crisps, a big packet of crisps, and that's what I do. While I'm doing that, yes, there is the benefit of the watching the TV and tasting the crisps. But overall, that's not a beneficial reward to me. It's not doing any good to my health. And even something like helping people. And how can helping people not be rewarding or not be beneficial? But if I help someone, and by helping them, I sacrifice something that I want or need or would like, yes, I feel good. And yes, I want to help them. And I'm happy that I've sacrificed that. I'm happy to sacrifice it for them, because I feel good that I've done it. But at the same time, it hasn't rewarded me. I've missed out on something that I have wanted or needed for myself. So the rewards that we get aren't even always beneficial to us.
Exactly. And, you know, when you say reward, so I think what you're referring to here, Cara, is as well, it's that constant sort of motivation to be helpful, to feel like you've got to be helpful to everybody, even when your helpfulness becomes a disadvantage to you. But you can't curb the habit because the reward subconsciously is there. I need to do this to be helpful, even if it's damaging to you because you are neglecting yourself in order to be helpful. And it's so interesting when you mention, you know, the cues, because these cues come up subconsciously as well. And as soon as we have that cue or that trigger, the habit then plays out. So it's not like we stop and think, oh, there's the trigger, now I need to act it out. It's something that just happens automatically. Those are the patterns. And the way they are stored in our brain is really the trigger or the cue, the pattern, and the reward. So each one is stored as a little pattern in our brain. And as soon as the trigger or the cue is there, we act upon it automatically, not stopping to determine whether what we've viewed as rewards are truly rewards to us. And very often, as you say, they aren't. But because at some subconscious level, we've associated this pattern with a reward, we continually play it out, even when it's not an advantage to us. So the big question, can we alter these habits? Is it possible to do so?
Well, yes, absolutely it is. And yeah, obviously, when we talk about rewards, we're not just talking about the things like the coffee and the book habits. It's not just coffee and book or cigarette and wine. It's everything in our lives. It's our relationships. It's how we manage our lives. It's everything, what we do from when we get up in the morning, the way we run our lives, the way we interact right until we get into bed at night. And the biggest thing for us is that we have to trust in ourselves. We have to have that self-awareness and trust in our ability to utilize our resourcefulness, to say, yes, I can change. If we think about it, we are the ones that created those habits in the first place. We programmed our computer brains to have those. So if we did that in the first place, then we can. It's a case of almost reprogramming just to change our habits. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just slotting in a program and uploading and updating. It takes a bit more effort, but we can do it. So, for example, where I said, if we sit every night and we binge in front of the TV, and that becomes our habit. And that's what we've been doing. Even if we say I've been doing it for years and that's just what I do, like you say, on autopilot. If I decide I want to exercise, then I can change that. So then I can say, you know what, every time I look at the TV or the couch or even a program. So if there's a program on TV that I watch and I say, you know what, when that program's on, I'm going to, instead of eating crisps, I'm going to exercise a bit. I'm going to do some sit-ups, push-ups, run on the spot, plank, whatever it is, and start associating the exercise with that program. I'm not missing out on the TV. So it's not a drastic change, because I think that's a big thing, is the drastic change is a huge issue. And we think it needs to be drastic. But if we look at saying, you know what, I'm still watching TV and I can still sit on the couch and watch TV, but when that program is on, I'm going to start exercising just for 20 minutes or half an hour. That change then starts happening. And we start doing that, and eventually that becomes the new habit. And then from that, we can build. And we can build up and say, you know what, instead of just that 20 minutes, it's going to be 2 hours or an hour of programs. And once we built that up, we can say, you know what, instead of a TV program, I'm going to listen to music while I exercise. And from that, I can say, you know what, instead of exercising at home, I can go to gym and listen to music and exercise. And the change has been incremental. So it's not saying, as of tonight, I'm denying myself TV and couch sitting time, because that's often where we go wrong, is we throw ourselves in the deep end, and that change that habit that we have is so difficult to change, because it's so demanding, it's so drastic, that we find it very difficult. Whereas if it's an incremental change and we create that new association, then we can do it.
Yes, yes. I think that the two key points here are, firstly, to emphasize the reward, to know what the reward is for this subtle change in the habit, and to clarify that reward. So as you say, what would be my reward for doing this bit of exercise in front of the TV instead of just sitting on the sofa? And the reward is that I'm going to feel healthier. So to keep on emphasizing the reward associated with this new habit of standing up and running on the spot, or doing a few sit-ups, or whatever the case may be. And then also to make sure that we implement the new habit many, many times, because the more we implement the new habit, the more this becomes the norm. And over a period of time, eventually that new habit, so it's trigger, process, reward, is stored in our brain. And that's a scientific fact. So, it's a matter of time, and this new habit is stored in that same little section of the brain where the old habit was. The old habit never leaves, it's always there, but it's almost as though the new habit overrides the old habit. And it becomes our new behavior. And instead of looking at the sofa and thinking, sit down, binge eat, as I did before, I now look at the sofa, or I look at the TV program, and I think, jump up and down, do a few squats, do some plank, or whatever the case may be. And that becomes my new behavior, my new habit, or my new pattern. I think it's also important to remember that the old pattern doesn't ever leave us. So even though we implement this new pattern, this new habit that is now stored in our brain, and we now look at this as our norm, the old habit can surface at any time, and especially when we are feeling weak. So, traumatized, upset, worried, stressed, that's when that old habit can rear its head. And that's when we need to really have that self-discipline and that control to say, whoa, stop here and take control. And even if we feel that that old habit has surfaced, so we say, gee, in the last week, what I've done is I've just gone right back to my old habit of sitting binging on the couch. It doesn't mean that that is now going to be my new norm again, and that I have to revert to that permanently. I can begin to implement my new habit again and say, well, you know what, pick myself up, dust myself off, and start all over again with this new habit that has been beneficial to me. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, and not hankering over what was. So when you talk about falling back into old habits, it's again back to what you're saying about what is familiar, and what is familiar creates comfort. And when we are stressed or worried or nervous, that's why we often fall back into those old habits, because somewhere it's saying to us, this is what's familiar, this is what I know, and what we need to do is say, but no, it's not. That is familiar. That's the old familiarity. The new one, the new comfort is what I'm doing at the moment, the changes that I have implemented now. And like you say, if we happen to fall back into those habits, then we do, because we are human. And we say, well, yes, but I have created new habits before, and I will do it again. And realizing that it doesn't define us, that we have that ability to create new rewards, to create new habits, and to focus on the change that we want. That we are not defined and finite based on the habits that we have developed.
That's right. Often our self-identification is related to those habits. And then, we can even say to labels. The labels obviously are labels of habits. So, I have a short temper, or whatever the case may be, because we respond with aggression to a situation. So because we've always done that, it's exactly the same thing that we've mentioned. It's cue, process, reward. We feel then the subconscious reward is, I've been in control. I've shown them what I can do. Yes. But when we think about it carefully, we say, is this really a reward? Because was it a constructive means of handling that relationship or that situation. It's not really beneficial, but at some level we view it as a reward. And then we label ourselves as having a short temper. And we allow that label to become who we are. And we define ourselves by that label, instead of saying, hold on, I can change at any time. When we look at drastic change, because you did mention that wherever possible, change should be incremental. And that is ideal, not to throw ourselves in the deep end, but to manage the process gently so that we ease ourselves into the new way of life, or whatever the case may be. But that's not always how things happen. Sometimes change can be drastic. It can happen overnight. And we find ourselves in the middle of this change. And that's when we feel like the rug has been pulled out of under us. We are lost. And again, the reason that we feel so lost is because what is familiar is suddenly gone. And in those times, I think all we can really do is look for some kinds of anchors, things that can still be familiar in the chaos, whether that is having my usual bowl of cereal in the morning, because for me, that process just grounds me and helps to anchor me in this time of chaos, or playing my favorite song during the day. So little things that we can do, and obviously this is very generally speaking, because chaos is personal to whoever is experiencing it at the time, but just to look for those anchors of familiarity to ease us through until we can form new habits to deal with the new situation that we found ourselves in. And that's really what managing change is all about.
Absolutely, that's it.
And
the better we can manage, exactly, and the better we can manage change, the better life experience we'll have, because as they say, the only constant is change.
That's right. And I think there's so much more to be discussed on this, because it's really quite a challenging thing for all of us.
Definitely.